There is a border state between waking and sleeping that every mystical tradition has recognized and named. The Tibetan Buddhists call it the bardo of dream yoga. The Sufis called it the alam al-mithal, the imaginal realm. Modern sleep researchers map it with electrodes and call it the hypnagogic state, that twilight where the rational mind releases its grip and the image-making faculty awakens. Neville Goddard called it the state akin to sleep. And he said this, that in that drowsy interval just before you fall unconscious at night, you hold the master key to the transformation of your entire world. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, actually. He taught that if you could enter that borderland deliberately, hold a single imaginal act steady within it, and then release into sleep saturated with its feeling, you would awaken to find the outer world rearranged to match the inner image. He said it plainly, repeatedly, insistently across 50 years of teaching. The hypnagogic state is not a curiosity of consciousness. It is the creative engine of your experience. Now here is what most people miss. Neville was not speaking poetically about visualization or positive thinking before bed. He was describing a precise psycho-spiritual technology, one that overlaps almost perfectly with what lucid dreamers call YLD and MILD techniques, what occultists call pathworking, what depth psychologists call active imagination, and what every esoteric school in history has recognized as the threshold where consciousness becomes causative. So the question is not whether this state exists. Science confirms it. Mystics have mapped it for millennia. The question is, did Neville give us the clearest, most practical instruction for using it that has ever been put into plain English? I tell you, he did. And in this episode, we are going to walk through exactly what he taught, step by step, word by word, so that by the end you will know not only what the hypnagogic state is, but how to enter it, how to work within it, and how to let it do the work it was designed to do, which is to manifest your assumption as your experience. This is Neville's teaching at its most concrete. This is the technique behind every testimony, every miracle, every so-called manifestation he ever described. Let's go in. Welcome to Neville Goddard Universe, where we explore the teachings of Neville Goddard, not as isolated metaphysics, but as a living stream of truth that flows through the great esoteric, mystical, and psychological traditions of the world. I'm your host, and in this episode we are doing something a little different. We are not comparing Neville to another tradition so much as we are excavating the single most practical technique he ever taught, his state akin to sleep method, and then showing how it converges perfectly with what lucid dreamers, occultists, and consciousness researchers have discovered about the hypnagogic state. This is Neville's SATS explained in full, not summarized, not simplified. Explained the way he gave it, with all its subtlety, all its power, and all its strangeness intact. Because here is the truth. Most people who try Neville's methods skip right past the hypnagogic instruction. They visualize during the day. They affirm in front of the mirror. They loop scenes while they are wide awake and distracted. And then they wonder why the technique does not seem to take. Neville was unambiguous. The state matters as much as the scene. He said the hypnagogic state is the creative threshold, the moment when the subconscious is most receptive, when the image you impress upon it sinks beneath the surface of waking thought and becomes causative. He said that what you feel in that drowsy state, you will encounter in your world. So, this episode is for anyone who has ever wondered, what exactly did Neville mean by state akin to sleep? How do I actually get there? How do I know when I am in it? And what do I do once I am? We are going to answer all of that. And we are going to show you how modern lucid dreaming techniques, willed, milled, wake, back to bed, are describing the same psychophysiological transition that Neville was teaching his audiences in rented halls in Los Angeles in 1948. If this exploration means something to you, if you feel that pull toward the deeper unity beneath these different languages, a like or a subscribe keeps this work alive, and I am genuinely grateful for every mind that walks this path with us. This channel exists because people like you want more than surface-level explanations. You want the real thing. All right, let us begin with Neville. Neville published a short book in 1944 called Feeling is the Secret. It is fewer than 50 pages, and buried within it is the most precise instruction for entering the creative state that he ever committed to print. He writes this: "The secret of imagining is the greatest of all problems, to the solution of which the mystic aspires, for supreme power, supreme wisdom, supreme delight lie in the far-off solution of this mystery." And then he tells you how to do it. He says, in preparing for sleep, you must enter a state of drowsiness, a kind of controlled passivity where the body is relaxed, the senses are dimmed, but you are not yet unconscious. You are hovering. You are suspended between waking and sleeping. And in that suspension, you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Not the thought of it, the feeling. He says you construct a single scene, brief, natural, implying the fulfillment of your desire, and you repeat it in your imagination until it takes on the tones of reality. You feel the textures, you hear the sounds, you let the scene become sensory, tactile, first person. And then, while still looping that scene, while still saturated in its feeling, you let yourself fall asleep. He is explicit. You do not do this during the day. You do not do it while walking or working or sitting upright in a chair. You do it at night, in bed, in the dark, in that liminal border state where the conscious mind begins to dissolve and the subconscious becomes receptive. Why? Because in the hypnagogic state, the critical faculty is suspended. The rational mind, which would ordinarily reject the imagined scene as unreal, is offline. The subconscious, which Neville called the deeper self, the servant that builds the outer world, is open. And what you impress upon it in that state, it accepts as true. Neville said it this way: the subconscious never fails to express what has been impressed upon it. So the technique is not about trying harder or concentrating longer. It is about timing. It is about state. It is about learning to catch yourself in that threshold moment and use it. Let me give you an example. 1. Neville told himself. A woman came to him. She wanted to be married. She had no prospects, no relationship, no clear path to the thing she desired. Neville told her, do not imagine the wedding. Do not picture the proposal. Imagine the ring on your finger. Feel the weight of it. Feel the band against your skin. And do it every night as you fall asleep. She did. She said that for weeks she would lie in bed and loop the sensation of twisting a wedding ring on her finger, the cool smoothness of the metal, the slight pressure, the reality of it. She did not try to figure out how it would happen. She did not worry about who the man would be. She simply assumed the feeling of the wish fulfilled and fell asleep in that assumption. Within 2 months, she was engaged. The man appeared. The relationship unfolded. The ring became physical. Neville did not call that manifestation. He called it the law. He said, you became what you assumed. You impressed the subconscious with the feeling of the ring, and the subconscious, which is the builder of circumstance, rearranged the world to match it. Now listen carefully, because this is where most people go off track. Neville did not say you visualize the scene and then hope it works. He said you enter a specific state of consciousness, drowsy, passive, receptive, and you do the imagining within that state. The state is the conductor. The state is what makes the imaginal act causative. He called it the state akin to sleep, and he meant it literally. Not metaphorically akin, actually akin. The same neurological and psychological threshold that precedes sleep every night. That is the creative state. In his 1948 lectures, he said this: you must be in the state akin to sleep, for in that state the conscious mind is quiet and the subconscious is most receptive. You gently lead yourself into a drowsy, comfortable state, and then you enact the scene which implies the fulfillment of your desire. You make it vivid, you make it real, and then you let sleep come over you while you are still feeling the reality of the scene. This is not daydreaming. This is not waking visualization. This is a deliberate use of the hypnagogic threshold. the exact same threshold that lucid dreamers, meditators, and occultists have been entering for centuries. And here is the key insight. Neville understood that this threshold is not just a psychological curiosity, it is a causative state. In that border zone, the laws of ordinary causation loosen. The distinction between inner and outer becomes permeable. What you feel as real in that state becomes real in your world, not because you wished hard enough, but because consciousness is the only reality, and in the hypnagogic state, you are sculpting consciousness directly. He said, assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, and observe the route that your attention follows. In other words, enter the state, feel the wish fulfilled, and let the subconscious do the rest. You do not force it, you do not track it. You simply plant the seed in the soil of sleep, and you let it grow. Now, before we go further, I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Neville was not teaching a bedtime affirmation practice. He was not telling you to repeat, I am wealthy, I am loved, I am healed, as you drift off. He was teaching you to enter the hypnagogic state, a real, measurable, neurologically distinct threshold, and use it to impress a sensory, feeling-toned imaginal act upon the subconscious. That is the technique, and it has a direct, unmistakable parallel in the techniques taught by lucid dreamers, occultists, and consciousness explorers across traditions. Let's look at that now. In the modern study of lucid dreaming, the practice of becoming conscious within the dream state, there are two foundational techniques. They are called willed and mild. Willed stands for wake. Initiated lucid dream. It means you stay conscious as your body falls asleep. You observe the hypnagogic hallucinations, the flickering images, the floating sensations, the dissolving of sensory input, and you ride that threshold all the way into the dream without losing awareness. MILD stands for mnemonic. Initiated lucid dream. It means you set an intention as you fall asleep. You repeat a phrase or rehearse a mental image so that when you enter the dream, the intention carries over and you recognize that you are dreaming. Now listen to what both of these techniques require. They require you to enter the hypnagogic state deliberately. They require you to work with the border zone between waking and sleeping. They require you to hold an intention or an image steady as the body transitions into unconsciousness. Does that sound familiar? It should, because that is exactly what Neville taught. Neville's SATS is functionally identical to a MILD-T technique applied not for lucidity, but for imaginal impression. You enter the drowsy state. You hold a scene. You let the scene become emotionally and sensorially real. And then you release into sleep while still feeling the reality of the scene. The only difference is the purpose. Lucid dreamers use the hypnagogic state to wake up inside the dream. Neville taught us to use it to impress the dream upon waking reality. Same threshold, same method, different application. And here is where it gets even more interesting. In the occult tradition, this same border state has been used for centuries as the gateway to what is called pathworking, or active imagination. The magician or mystic enters a trance state, usually through deep relaxation, breath control, or rhythmic sound, and then visualizes a symbolic journey or encounter. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn taught elaborate visualizations of the Tree of Life, entered through the hypnagogic state. Carl Jung called it active imagination and used it therapeutically, guiding patients into the twilight state and letting unconscious symbols arise and interact. In every case, the technique is the same. Relax the body, quiet the surface mind, enter the threshold, and work with image and feeling in that liminal space. Neville simply stripped away the ritual and the symbolism and told you to do it with the simplest possible image, the image of your wish fulfilled. He said, you do not need elaborate pathworkings. You do not need symbols or sigils. You need a single scene, naturalistic and clear, that implies the thing you want is already done. And you need to feel it real as you drift into sleep. Now here is the deeper convergence. Modern sleep science has mapped the hypnagogic state with precision. It is the transition from alpha to theta brainwave activity. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational analysis and critical judgment, begins to quiet. The default mode network, which maintains your sense of linear identity and time, starts to dissolve. The amygdala, which governs emotional response, becomes more active. Sensory input from the external world fades, and internally generated imagery begins to rise. In other words, you become more receptive, more emotional, more visually fluid, and less critical. This is the state Neville told you to use. And it is the same state every mystical tradition has identified as the threshold of spiritual and magical work. The Tibetan Buddhists call it the state where you can plant seeds in the substrate. Consciousness. The alaya vijnana. The storehouse from which all experience arises. They teach dream yoga as a way to work directly with that substrate, and their methods. Entering the hypnagogic state, visualizing symbolic forms, releasing into sleep, are functionally identical to Neville's SATS. The Sufis spoke of the mundus imaginalis, the imaginal world, and they said it could be entered through the same threshold. Henry Corbin, the great scholar of Islamic mysticism, wrote that the imaginal realm is not fantasy. It is an intermediate ontological domain, more real than matter, accessed through visionary consciousness. And how did the Sufis enter it? Through controlled relaxation, breath, and the hypnagogic border. Neville did not borrow from these traditions. He arrived at the same truth from his own exploration of consciousness and scripture. He said, I am is the door. And the hypnagogic state is the threshold where that door swings open. So when Neville told you to enter the state Akin To Sleep and loop the scene of the wish fulfilled, he was not giving you a quirky mental exercise. He was giving you access to the same creative threshold that every esoteric school in history has guarded, ritualized, and explored. He democratized it. He made it plain. He said, you do not need initiation. You do not need a temple or a teacher. You need a bed, a desire, and the willingness to feel it real as you fall asleep. And here is the payoff, the thing the thumbnail promised you. Neville taught you how to dream your wish real, not metaphorically, literally. You enter the hypnagogic state. You construct a scene that implies your wish is already fact. You feel the sensory and emotional reality of that scene. And then you let yourself fall asleep inside it, so that the last thing your subconscious receives before it takes over completely is the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That feeling sinks into the substrate. It becomes a causative impression. And the subconscious, which Neville called the servant, which the Kabbalists call the neshama, which Jung called the unconscious, which Buddhists call the alaya, begins to build your outer experience to match it. You wake up in a world arranged by your assumption. That is not belief. That is the law. And the hypnagogic state is the mechanism. Now, how do you actually do it? Let us walk through this step by step. I am going to give you Neville's method exactly as he taught it, with the precision and clarity he used in his 1950s lectures, especially his teaching and feeling. Is the secret, and the lecture series he gave on imaginal techniques. This is the SATS technique in full. First, you wait until you are ready for sleep, not until you are drowsy during the day, not while sitting up or distracted. You do this at night, in bed, in the position you normally sleep in. Neville said the state is naturally available to you at that time. You do not have to force it. Your body is already preparing for sleep. You are simply going to guide the transition consciously. So, you lie down, you close your eyes, and you let your body begin to relax. Neville did not prescribe a specific relaxation technique, but he did say this: immobilize the body. Let the limbs go heavy. Let the breath slow and deepen. Do not try to stay rigid or alert. You are not meditating to concentrate. You are relaxing toward drowsiness. Some people find it helpful to do a gentle body scan, releasing tension from the feet upward. Others simply breathe slowly and let the muscles soften. The goal is not perfect stillness. The goal is comfort and passivity. You want to feel like you could drift off at any moment, but you are holding just enough awareness to guide the process. This is the threshold. This is the hypnagogic state beginning. You will know you are entering it when thoughts start to become imagistic, when the inner chatter quiets and drifting pictures or sensations begin to arise, when your sense of the room around you starts to blur and your attention turns inward. Do not fight it. Do not analyze it. Just notice, I am at the border. Now, once you are in that drowsy, comfortable, receptive state, you bring your scene to mind. The scene must be simple. Neville said this repeatedly. Do not construct an elaborate sequence. Do not try to visualize a whole day or a long conversation. Choose a single moment, 3 to 5 seconds. That implies your desire is already fulfilled. If you want a job, do not imagine the interview. Imagine shaking hands with a colleague who says, "Great to have you on the team." Feel the handshake, hear the voice. If you want a relationship, do not imagine the whole romance. Imagine your hand being held, or a voice saying, "I love you," or the weight of someone's head on your shoulder. If you want health, imagine your doctor saying, "You're completely clear." Or imagine yourself doing something you couldn't do before, running, dancing, lifting something heavy, and feel the strength in your body. The scene must be in first person. You are not watching yourself. You are in the scene, experiencing it from within. And the scene must imply the end. Not the means, not the process. The end, the state of the wish already fulfilled. Neville said, do not imagine the means. Imagine the end, and the means will take care of themselves. So you choose your scene, you have it clear in your mind. And now, from that drowsy hypnagogic state, you begin to loop it. You run the scene, you feel it, you hear it, you sense it. You let it become vivid and real, and then you run it again. You are not trying to concentrate with force. You are gently holding the scene in awareness, letting it replay, letting it deepen. If your mind wanders, you bring it back gently. If the scene starts to shift or elaborate on its own, let it, as long as it still implies the fulfillment. The key is feeling. Neville said, feeling is the secret. You must feel the reality of the scene, not the hope of it, not the wish for it, the reality. You must invoke the emotional and sensory tone of the thing being done. And then, and this is critical, you release. You do not try to stay awake. You do not try to hold the scene until you force yourself into some perfect state. You simply let go. You let sleep come. You fall asleep while still feeling the scene, still saturated in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Neville said the transition into sleep is the seal. It is the moment when the impression sinks fully into the subconscious. You do not need to remember the scene all night. You do not need to control your dreams. You just need to let the last waking feeling be the feeling of the wish fulfilled. That is the technique. Do it every night until the desire feels natural. Neville said, until it takes on the tones of reality. Until you no longer feel like you are imagining. You feel like you are remembering. And then let it go. Stop doing the technique. Live from the assumption that it is done. Now, here is where the lucid dreaming techniques can enrich your practice. If you find it hard to enter the hypnagogic state, try the wake back to bed method. Set an alarm for 4 or 5 hours after you fall asleep. Wake up. Stay awake for 10 to 20 minutes. Then go back to bed and do the SATS technique. Your body will drop into the hypnagogic state much faster, and the impression will often be more vivid. If you find it hard to hold the scene, use the MIL-D framework. Set a clear intention before you begin. Say to yourself, tonight as I fall asleep, I will feel the reality of my wish fulfilled. Repeat it a few times. Let it anchor your attention. And if you find yourself drifting into random hypnagogic imagery, do not resist it. Observe it. That drifting is proof you are in the state. Once you recognize it, gently guide the imagery back toward your chosen scene. The state does the work. You are simply the gardener planting the seed. Neville said, do not be concerned with the how. You are relieved of all responsibility save that of accepting the end. So accept it, feel it, sleep in it, and let the law do the rest. So now we come to the question beneath the technique. Why does this work? Why should a drowsy imaginal act, repeated at the edge of sleep, rearrange the material conditions of your life? The answer Neville gave is simple and total, because consciousness is the only reality. The outer world is not the cause of your experience. It is the effect. It is the hardened shadow of what you have assumed to be true within. And the hypnagogic state is the threshold where assumption becomes causative, where the inner movement registers directly upon the substance of experience. He said, "The world is yourself pushed out. So when you lie down at night and feel the reality of your wish fulfilled, you are not pretending. You are not hoping the universe will notice. You are impressing your own subconscious, the builder, the creative power, the I am, with a new pattern, and that power, which is you, begins immediately to externalize that pattern. Now, here is what makes this convergence with other traditions so striking. Every mystical system that has mapped the hypnagogic state has said the same thing, that in that threshold, the boundary between self and world becomes permeable. The Kabbalists called it the veil of Parokheth. The Vedantists called it the space where Maya, the illusion of separateness, momentarily dissolves. Jung called it the encounter with the collective unconscious. Tibetan Buddhists call it the recognition that all phenomena arise from mind. Different languages. Same truth. In the hypnagogic state, you are closer to the source. You are less identified with the surface personality, the story, the history. You are more fluid, more receptive, more creatively potent. And if you use that state consciously, not to escape into dreams, but to impress a new assumption, you are doing what every magician, mystic, and seer has done throughout history. You are bending reality at its root. Neville understood this. He did not need the elaborate symbolism of the Western esoteric tradition. He did not need the cosmology of the East. He simply recognized that the power to create lies within, and the hypnagogic state is where that power is most accessible. He said, "You are the operant power. There is no other." So when you enter the state akin to sleep, and loop the scene of the wish fulfilled, you are not appealing to something outside yourself. You are not sending a request to the universe or trying to align with some external law. You are becoming what you desire. You are assuming the state. And assumption, sustained in the creative threshold, hardens into fact. This is not belief. This is not faith in the traditional sense. This is the recognition that you are consciousness, and consciousness is causative, and the hypnagogic state is the doorway where you exercise that causative power most directly. And here is the larger implication, the thing that should fill you with wonder. If this technique works, and I tell you, it does, test it yourself. Then it means the world you wake up to every morning is not fixed. It is not given. It is responsive to what you assume within yourself. It means your past does not determine your future. Your circumstances do not limit you. The outer facts of your life are not the final word. The final word is what you feel to be true in the silence of your own consciousness. And if you learn to enter the hypnagogic state and feel a new truth, to feel the wish fulfilled, to feel the state assumed, then you will wake into a world that reflects it. That is the promise of every mystical tradition. That is the heart of the law Neville taught. And the hypnagogic state is the mechanism that makes it practical. So dream your wish real, not someday, tonight. You clicked on this episode because somewhere inside you already knew. You knew that the border between waking and sleeping is not just a biological transition. It is a creative threshold. And you wanted to know how to use it. Now you know. Neville gave you the method. He gave it plainly, practically, repeatedly. Enter the state Akin To Sleep. Construct the scene. Feel it real. Release into sleep. Let the subconscious do the work. That is not theory. That is instruction. And the convergence with lucid dreaming, with occult pathworking, with the mystical technologies of consciousness, that is not coincidence. It is confirmation. Every tradition that has looked deeply into the nature of mind has found the same threshold. And every tradition that has worked with that threshold has discovered the same truth. What you feel to be real in that state becomes real in your world. If this episode has clarified something for you, if it has given you a technique you can actually use, then I would be grateful if you would let this work reach others. A like, a share, a subscription. This channel exists because people like you want the real teaching, not the surface version. And I am honored to walk this path with you. Tonight, when you lie down, you have a choice. You can drift into sleep unconsciously, letting whatever patterns already exist in your subconscious continue to play out. Or you can enter that threshold deliberately. You can choose a scene. You can feel it real. You can let yourself fall asleep inside the wish fulfilled. You can use the hypnagogic state the way Neville taught, as the master key to the transformation of your life. The state is already there, waiting for you every night. The power is already within you. All you have to do is assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and let sleep carry it into the deep. The world you wake to will be the world you dared to feel real in the dark.